So hi there, my name is James Simpson, and I will let everyone else introduce themselves here in a moment. In fact, go ahead. Clint, go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself.
The full spiel?
The full spiel is fine. Because these people have do anyone know who Clint is? Yes, the full spiel.
Wow, that's surprising. My name is Clint Doriot. I work for a company called Thrust Interactive. We are a client-driven game development company, so people come to us with a concept or a game that they've got implemented that needs to be fixed, or they need a server backend, and we'll go from design to development to support for their game as it's in production. I've been there for about 2 years, and in that time we've largely focused on social and mobile games. So it's a lot of asynchronous gameplay. That's not typically what you guys would think of when you're talking about networking for games, but it's a critical aspect, especially in the casual space. So things like Trivia Crack or Words with Friends doesn't have all the complexities that a real-time server would need, but there are certainly some complexities with dealing with persistent data storage and scaling up to massive amounts of users. So
that's pretty sweet. Okay, Matt.
Hey everybody, my name is Matt Woomer. I am a programmer, and I started working in 2000 on City of Heroes, which was a massive multiplayer online game. We had a backend that we wrote for that. That was just in C, and then we worked on City of Heroes, City of Villains, Champions Online, and then I came out here, worked with Hi-Rez for a couple of years on Global Agenda, which was a first-person shooter that they ran the servers for, that they run centralized servers for. And then I worked for a little bit at CCP, although not on their servers, down in Decatur, or Stone Mountain at the time. And then in 2009, I went with another ex-Cryptic Studio friend of mine, and we made Blue Mammoth Games. And we made an online, the business plan when we started out was to make an MMO that on the back end didn't know that it wasn't World of Warcraft or City of Heroes or something like that, but on the front end had a super lightweight client. It was a web client, a 2D side-scrolling client that so that we wouldn't that our small team could do. And we released that in 2011. It was called Dungeon Blitz. It had a lot of players and didn't make very much money, but that's for the free-to-play panel. And then now we are working on Brawlhalla, which is a fighting game that also has centralized servers, which has a lot of very different problems than an MMO has. And that's on Steam right now, and if anybody wants a key to jump in, see me afterwards. I got tons of keys.
Very good.
Hey, so my name is Zach Inks. Currently, I'm wrapping up a PhD at Clemson University in Human-Centered Computing, but previously I was working there as a VR developer, doing simulation training applications. Nothing too sexy, but I don't know how much I can talk about it, but one of them was like, say, a warehouse training for like fire safety stuff. So I did the art and the programming, and before that I ran a small studio that I sort of had to walk away from a while back, that we were working on a multiplayer space shooter. Recently, however, in my PhD research, I'm working towards a prototype using the new Unity low-level API networking, and it's basically, has anybody seen The Void or any of those VR theme parks? If you look at a lot of what they're doing there, they're strapping a laptop on somebody's back and then having to support that, and from personal experience with some of the other researchers in the group that I'm in, it's not really practical, cost-wise, battery-wise. It's just a lot of maintenance on that end. So what I'm trying to do is use the low-level API to basically have sort of what you could kind of think of like a thin client, where like you'd have like a mobile device like the Galaxy Gear setup, the Gear VR, and basically take input from that, send it to a server, do all the high-end stuff on the server, and send back the graphics after the fact. Obviously there's issues across a network, but this is only going to be LAN and a peer-to-peer connection, so that's kind of where I'm going with it. It's still in progress, and maybe by next year I can show you guys a demo if it's successful.
You can show us something if it's not successful?
Yeah, possibly. That's a good learning experience.
It is. I learn from other people's code. Hi, I'm James Simpson, a.k.a. Dr. Unity, and owner of Cell Block Studios. I've worked for many different companies. The last major game I worked on was Wasteland 2. So you click the button, that was probably me. But I'm working at a company called World Touch Gaming, which is a casino company here in Cumming, Georgia. And I do a lot of the back end. I take what the artists do on the front end. They make these wonderful games. Right now we have a coin pusher that just came out, and I have to support the back end with accounting and social networking and all that jazz to make sure everything functions properly. So when I was asked to be a moderator for this, I saw the title of this, and I saw back end out front. And I didn't know if I was going to be going to Siege or the Heretic. So I thought it was a kind of interesting concept. It's like, okay, what does that possibly mean? Well, a lot of times artists will build these wonderful games, or even students will build these wonderful games, and it's all client-driven. Then they realize, well, they got to take people's email. They got to take credit cards. They got to work with social networking back end. They got forms to fill out. They got just a communication if they want to do a multiplayer game. So hence the reason why we're talking about the back end, which is this part you never really see. It's never the pretty glamorous part of the job, but it's like a long time ago I made a program and it said the number 42. And my mother was like, what's that? I said, Mom, it did all this and this and it's counting the grains of sand and all this. And she's like, it says 42. That's not the sexy part of it. So what we have here is we have 3 people who are extremely talented. They have worked on the back-end systems of, obviously we have City of Heroes, we have Thrust Interactive, and we have an unnamed MMO that can't be talked about, which in this business happens a lot. So, how many people in here have worked on back-end systems? 1, 2, okay, more than 5. Okay, that works. Well, I guess we'll start with Clint. When you were talking about Thrust, what were some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face dealing with, like, firewall issues, for example?
Oh, well, we don't really have to deal much with that. So we don't.
Lucky you.
So our solution, we don't have hardware. We're a small company. I don't enjoy building servers. I don't enjoy dealing with the security aspects of that.
You're not making the job sound glamorous.
I like programming, and so we use Google Cloud Platform. It's an infrastructure as a service. It's similar to Amazon AWS with a slightly different tool set. You can do virtual machines, you can do persistent data storage in SQL databases or NoSQL databases, content delivery networks, but what we really like about it is Google App Engine, and that's a platform as a service. With a platform as a service, they basically give you a black box, and you just write code, and it's great. You don't have to worry about all the other stuff. You still have to make sure it's secure and that your code isn't having any security flaws, but you just don't have to deal with a whole lot of other issues. And you can get down to the meat of your problem and solving what needs to be solved.
Can you talk about any of the latest games that you worked on?
Sure.
Or any projects that you worked on that you can give an example of?
Sure. So we've got a game out in the App Store now called HLN Keywords. It's a trivia game. Again, it's kind of asynchronous gameplay. You know, we use Google App Engine and their data store to store all the data.
Right.
And it's more of like a REST API, or you know, it's almost like a website, except instead of submitting forms and downloading and rendering HTML, you're passing JSON data back and forth.
Do you prefer JSON over like XML?
Yeah.
Why?
Just more lightweight.
Yes. Okay. Matt.
Sure.
Yeah. Good Lord. Okay. So you talked about you got Brawlhalla out on Steam. So what were some of the challenges you had to work with Brawlhalla on Steam and networking?
So Steam's been really easy to work with. Once you're on Steam, they have an API that can hook up. You know, we just use C functions that we call, but they have you know, they have other APIs too. If you're working in JavaScript, you're working in whatever else. So all of the payment stuff, all of the, you know, credit cards and who is this player and who are their friends, Steam just offers up in just a really simple API of just functions you can call. And that's that apparently has gotten much better over the course of the last few years, because I've heard horror stories about it and was terrified that it was going to be a big mess, but it was really very straightforward. If anyone's done that same sort of thing with Facebook, it's very similar. And it's almost like with these payment and friends list APIs, it's kind of like I almost feel like we started to figure them out. We as a world of, like, you know, how to do these things. And so, you know, now you'll see that the Facebook API and the Steam API, and I wish I could think of a third just off the top of my head, because that would have been a better
Amazon.
story. Yeah, okay. I'm thinking of things that have friends list. The Xbox
Yeah, PlayStation.
API. I haven't looked at the PlayStation yet. But you might be right. It is kind of like they've kind of figured it out. So that's something you can kind of look forward to is when you start working with these guys, kind of be like, okay, we've kind of figured it out. It's not going to be as onerous, and every single one has their own way of doing it as it used to be. So that was not a good example of something that was difficult. With Brawlhalla, it's a fighting game, and with the one thing that we found out with that, which we could have thought of, with an MMO, you're fighting other monsters with players, and so the networking requirements are much looser. On your client, you can have your client just get whatever networking information that it's got and that it's heard from the server, and you can do forward prediction, and you can just kind of guess where the monster is, and you can do all these things, and you can interpolate, because it doesn't really matter if you and I see the location of the monster in a slightly different place or the location of each other in a slightly different place. It doesn't really hurt things at all, and so you can be super loose about that. Then with something like a first-person shooter, which is what I was kind of expecting when I went into it, something like Global Agenda, or the requirements are much tighter because we're fighting against each other, but I can't really see my own character that well, and someone is just shooting me with a bullet that I also can't see. I can't actually see the bullet. So any networking problems that we have, you can push to you can favor the shooter. In other words, if I'm using my gun and I'm shooting Jesse here, and we can use my simulation to decide whether or not we hit Jesse, because Jesse's not going to get that mad if he'd actually dodged behind a wall before he got shot, because he can't really tell. With a fighting game, what we discovered is that both players get equally mad. And so if you are swinging, if I'm swinging at Jesse and it looks like I should have hit and I didn't, I'm angry. And if you, Jesse, can exactly see what's going on, so if it looks like you should have missed and you get hit, you are also ticked off. So that has been sort of the interesting thing about a 2D fighting game. And if you think about our game, just picture it. If you think of a game like Smash Brothers, it's that kind of fighting game. So that's been like the big challenge for us, is coming up with the server infrastructure and a network infrastructure, but also a server infrastructure for the topic of this panel that best supports that kind of absolute lowest latency we can possibly come up with, so that we can say with confidence to any player who's complaining, we're 100% sure it's your internet's fault, right? And so that's really been an interesting project for us that I guess we can talk about. I feel like I've gone on and on.
Zachary,
Yeah.
what projects can you talk about that you've worked on that you've had some challenges about?
Okay, so obviously in my previous game, NAT punch through was an issue.
Right.
We bounced around to a couple different networking solutions on that. I did eventually, the old Unity networking system, I did eventually get really comfortable with it, but it has a lot of limitations, specifically the NAT punch through issues when it comes to, like, if you want to have the game run on mobile, because it's not really from my understanding, it's not really the devices so much that'll block NAT punch through, but
It's the carrier.
yeah, it's a carrier. And I don't know if that's true outside the United States, but it's kind of a bummer, and so you have to find another way to communicate, so you can't sort of do direct connection any sort of way. And so the solutions that I've played with outside of that have been like Photon, and then the new Unity high-level API uses what's called a relay server. So just think of it like a server that basically doesn't do any real simulation calculation. It just sort of connects two clients to each other, and then you sort of have, in the same sort of concept with Photon, you have a master client, which is basically the guy who's running the simulation and then sending stuff through the relay server, but the two clients are never directly connected, and so there's certain security things with that too. most recently, again, with some of the research that I'm working up to is, figuring out how to, render something and send it quickly across the network enough to basically get that non-vomit inducing VR. And that's really a challenge. That's I guess one of the major takeaways I wanted to express to you guys is, if you haven't done any network gameplay or network stuff in general, is don't send stuff you don't need to. If you have to send something, send it only as frequently as you need to send it, and then compress the snot out of it if you can. And so that some of the solutions that I'm playing with right now to sort of augment this is I'm actually thinking about running the simulation on the mobile device through the Gear VR, and then also on the server, and then trying to synchronize the rendered frames. And so if I do have slowdowns, I can maybe blend those together in like a compositing sort of setup. But I'm not entirely sure right now. It's still entirely experimental. But again, the idea is to sort of offload that need to have a laptop strapped to your back in order to sort of free roam VR.
Does anyone know what NAT punch through is? Who doesn't know what NAT punch through is? Zachary, you want to explain what a NAT punch through is?
Okay, so long story short is you have firewalls, you have other things in the way. You need to basically be able to get to that other computer, and so you can't get its actual IP directly, and so the NAT punch through is just a methodology for, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it allows you to get that connection set up. Without it, you pretty much just don't have a chance of connecting unless you have some other mediator like a relay server, like what Unity's new system does.
Okay. What type of services, you mentioned Google services, what type of services do you use besides Google services? Do you use any like WebSocket servers or anything of that nature?
No, we pretty much just use their platform. It works great. So
He's pretty happy, isn't he? This is awesome. I'm pulling my hair out working on things. Yes, I actually started on something called SmartFox Server. Well, actually, I started on Unity about 9 years ago, and they had a networking feature in there that I absolutely hated. And this was on Unity 1.2. It's been a while. And I hated it so much, I decided to learn Java and ActionScript 1 to work with SmartFox Server. Okay? If you ever program ActionScript 1, it's horrible. Okay? It's absolutely a nightmare to work with. But I decided to use that, and actually Unity's and Unity was on a Mac, and it wasn't Mac friendly. But besides that, I went from SmartFox, which when you actually get it working is actually pretty good. What's great about it is, Cartoon Network uses it mainly because it's cross-platform. So you can put it on Windows, you can put it on Mac, you can put it on Linux, you can put it on whatever you want. And then I went over to Photon, and Photon has been pretty, well, ever since version 3, it got a lot better. Before 1 and 2, the people who make it exit games, they assume you know a lot of the terminology, like NAT punch through and sockets and packets, and a lot of these terminology, they are kind of set in stone, but a lot of people don't understand them or don't know how they relate. So their documentation was pretty much absolutely horrible. But around version 3, they kind of realized, well, people are not using it because they don't understand how to use it. It's like, we have this great architecture, we just got to figure out how to tell people. So they updated their documentation, and all of a sudden there was a flood of people starting coming in. And then Unity decided to finally up their ante and says, you know what, we're tired of losing people to SmartFox and Photon and Bolt and not UNet, what's the guy, Michael, who did NGUI? Torajian? TNet? Is it TNet?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did TNet. It's like, well, we need to keep our people here. So they actually came out in what, 5.1? Unity 5.1? 5.1?
The
multiplayer?
Stuff? Yeah.
And the new one, yeah, I actually downloaded it for the first time last week, and I had a game up and running in probably a couple hours. Mm-hmm. And that was just, what am I doing here? And there was like no documentation, there's no samples, there's an API list, but if you know the terminology, it's really easy to start implementing. Mm-hmm. Matt, what architectures do you guys use on your back end?
Well, that's kind of interesting because I'm sitting here thinking, we pretty much roll all our own stuff. We, on the back end, we have we own our own machines. We're in a data center down in Atlanta. We have a database there. We have the game servers. We have the game servers nearby. We built all that out ourselves. A lot of the reason that we did that was because of all the networking requirements I was talking about earlier, and also because that's just kind of where our background was from MMOs. I don't actually recommend it. And that's kind of what I'm sitting here thinking as Clint is talking and James is talking about. If you are starting out and you're like, okay, well, I've got my game and I want to get it. I want to get multiplayer going and I want to get all this stuff. I think the best way to go, I haven't ever used the Google services, but just the Amazon Web Services. That is 100% where I would start. I would sit down, I would take that as far as I could go before I went and bought my own rack and started trying to run my own servers, unless you're just super interested in that kind of stuff. They're really remarkable where they've come in the last, I don't know, 5 years or whatever. Just the degree to which you can go to a website and you can sign up for have some servers to run my game.
For a year free.
Yeah, it's remarkable, and just how easy it is, and how easy it is to scale up. It gets probably expensive. I haven't done that part of it, but for small games, it's very, very reasonably priced. The risk and the worry always is that when you sign up for an Amazon Web Service or something like that, you don't know what machine you're getting. The machine could be anywhere in the U.S. It could be, I think it's just in the U.S. I don't actually even know that. You don't know what machines are around it. You don't know
the latency.
Yeah, you don't know what kind of latency. You don't know what you're getting. So a player, for example, for our data center, if a player lives in Kentucky and they connect to our servers and their ping is 90, it's probably going to be 90 every time they connect forever, and they can get used to that and they can play the game that way, and they can stick with it. Whereas with if you sign up with Amazon Web Servers, they might connect a week later and the game is running out of a data center that's somewhere completely different.
Arizona or something.
It's in Arizona, and you don't know, and they don't know, and their experience can be different, which is all a bad thing, but it's worth it. And it's the trade-off you get in terms of not having to manage your own stuff, and in most games, unless you're doing a very, even a shooter, you're going to be all right. I don't know. Again, I'm rambling under the answer to the question, but I'm thinking of it as I'm sitting here. I would definitely recommend that you start with something like that and take it as far as you can go, because of just how much work and expense buying your own rack and buying your own servers are.
So basically, I get, if you don't have any experience, don't start your own business of working with servers. Use something already existing off the shelf.
That's
Zachary?
right.
Yeah, I can iterate a little bit on that. So, I think it's helpful too for people who haven't sort of dug into it, but it's good to sort of think about the differences of what you're using networking for. So asynchronous play versus synchronous play is a totally different beast. Synchronous play that is that doesn't have to be Twitch-based, like a non-first-person shooter, like maybe turn-based, could be done with TCP. And so, some of the options we've talked about are more UDP versus TCP. And, the things with UDP is, usually it's not necessarily reliable, that you're getting the data. So some of the interpolation, extrapolation that Matt was just talking about earlier, you have to account for a lot of that stuff. I mean, you have to do it really with TCP too, but it kind of depends on what you're trying to go for, as well as when you're thinking about, talking about services. Another one that I've been playing with is Couchbase. So you've probably heard of SQL databases, but there's this new idea, or new-ish idea, of NoSQL database, and so Couchbase sort of organizes its data a little bit differently, and so you have the whole networking side of things that is more or less, it could drive gameplay, but it also is like what you see for like friends lists and other sort of related to gameplay kind of networking deals. And so usually you depending on what you want to make, it changes the spectrum of what sort of challenges you have to tackle and what you have to think about. I will say from experience that a lot of what I've run into is that you know, you want to do Twitch-based stuff, it just, you know, it's sort of like how's it going to scale, you know? Like what you're saying with latency and ping, you know, depending on, I don't know, I guess an example of what something I play is I play World of Tanks, and, you know, going between, you know, a ping of, you know, 30 to a ping of 90 is a big difference in like what I can execute skill set wise in the game. And if I go beyond that, all of a sudden there's you know, this frustration level that starts to creep in. So, you know, you got a wide variety of things, as we sort of alluded to earlier. Mobile brings a whole nother round of, because the kind of connection you get through a provider for cable internet or what have you is going to be different. You're going to see different sort of packet loss, different sort of latencies versus, say, going over a mobile network. So there's a lot of little considerations. I would personally advise if you're going to do something networked, maybe start off with something where you can have some fudge factor in terms of, you know, like you're saying, like, did I hit them? Did they hit me? Did I get out of the way? You know, those sorts of Twitch-based sort of stuff. I think if you can fake it, then that's fine. Again, don't send what you don't need. Compress what you do have to send, and then try and figure out ways to say, okay, well, player, well, you know, this is all you really need actual simulation to be driving things.
So basically, don't make a first-person shooter at the beginning.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like,
Make turn-based if you're going to be doing it for the first time.
A lot of like the UNet and then a lot of the Unreal stuff. There's a lot of well, not as much with UNet yet, but there's a lot of good stuff showing off first-person shooters. You just have to realize the trade-offs are that, you know, you're gonna have, you know, probably to limit the amount of players you're gonna support, and, you know, if you're running your own servers or paying for servers in a specific geographical location, you got to think about issues with you know, how that's going to talk to people that are on the other side of the planet. So yeah, there's just a lot of considerations, and everything has trade-offs. So you just got to figure out where your trade-offs are going to be and kind of adjust for that.
Do any of us even play first-person? Up here, do you guys play any first-person shooters?
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What was the last one you played?
Well, let's see. I play a lot of Team Fortress, too. That's my main thing. And then Hi-Res was showing Paladins, which is really cool.
Okay.
I was going to say, in general, the idea of don't do a first-person shooter would be a good advice, except most of the engines, and by most of the engines, I mean the one I'm familiar with, Unreal, is really, really good at it out of the box, and so
It makes a few years of practice.
It makes it actually not a bad choice early on, because you can leverage all the stuff that they've already figured out about.
That's fair. I like that. What was the last first-person shooter you played?
GoldenEye, I don't know. I play a lot of Splatoon. That's got a lot of the similar networking problems.
Yeah.
But,
That's on the Wii U, right?
mm-hmm.
Okay. Zachary?
Probably Battlefield series. I haven't played too much recently, but looking forward to Battlefield, the Star Wars.
Yeah, I know the demo just came out with Thursday.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to pick it up or try it out, but looks nice.
It does. I'm really, really, really excited about it. I never played any of the Battlefield series, so it's kind of weird me wanting to look at a Battlefield series. I was going to kind of see if I could open up to slight questions. We're not going to build your architecture for you, but we had your hand up here first. Yes?
Just because you guys just talked about first-person shooters.
Oh, God.
Like, ever since you brought up the topic of simulating whether or not you got hit first, Planet Side 2, the way they do that, I've got to say...
The first time or second time? The first time or second time?
First time or second time?
Yeah,
Planet
Planet
Side
Side
1
came
or
out.
2.
Yeah,
Planet Side 2,
yeah, years ago.
Used to muted them.
And it was like, what, 64 by 64, and that was 10 years ago or something like that?
Yes.
It was a long time ago. But go ahead.
Lots of players now, and far too often I run into the problem where I've been shot, but my computer doesn't realize it until I'm behind the wall. And what they do on there, that's one of the few times where I've actually seen where you can kill, each player can kill each other. You can end up with a sort of draw, because both of their machines are doing, I think it was client-side hit detection, and just sending it off. So both of them kill each other, and both of them kill each other.
So there's probably still a master server architecture recording all that, and then which packet comes in first, and they'll say you're the dead one.
I think it takes care of both, even if the one that shot you was dead, because otherwise, how would could it be latency that keeps, or that causes the other guy to die as well? The guy that shot the guy that die?
Well, yeah, the way that they're doing it is, yes, they are, the server is authoritative in the sense that it's not going to let you cheat, but the server is in fact looking back into the past and seeing what simulation you ran and just, you know, making sure you didn't cheat on it, but it's accepting your inputs as like, so if you saw yourself kill me in PlanetSide 2 and I saw you die when I shot you, that is completely legal and correct. That's the way it's designed, because, you know, the server has its authoritative simulation, but it does in fact look back into the past and say, okay, based on where he was, that is in fact what he saw. He wasn't cheating. We'll go ahead and let him do it. And I think they probably let you do that up to maybe 250 milliseconds. But yeah, that's pretty common now because it does give a lot, like you said, a lot better experience.
I do like it better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, question's a little technical. I try and kind of teach this stuff to college students. So in real-time video game networking, I currently cover an authoritative server with client-side prediction and then synchronous simulation like old-school RTS stuff. And my question is, am I teaching the right stuff? Are there new APIs that move us beyond having to deal with those kinds of specific technical details, which is a very difficult subject to teach? And as games move into kind of that hybrid space where they're not really a traditional FPS and they're not really a traditional RTS, but you've got still lots of stuff happening, are there new networking models that kind of combine the two? Is there a gold star you could recommend, a new Unity API? Do you have anything to say about that in this context?
Are you talking about like dedicated authoritative or client authoritative? Like where a client is
authoritative with a client-side prediction.
Okay, so I guess the variation on that would be like the UNet stuff. Like, I'm doing peer-to-peer because I'm using the low-level stuff, but I'm like, Unity's low-level is almost like facilitating the socket connection, and then it's just sort of up to you to send raw data and manage it. The high-level API doesn't really. I think because they pretty much want you to buy their subscription to the relay service and whatnot. It doesn't really allow you to do any sort of direct connection at all, from my understanding at this point. There was some talk on the forums about maybe doing that, and then eventually having it where you could host your own sort of relay server. But the idea there, where the paradigm changes there again, is like you want one of the clients to act as a master client, so it's authoritative, and it's just sending stuff through the relay server. The sort of the catch-22 with that, and I haven't tried this out just yet, but is host migration. So if you're the authoritative client and you drop, how do you handle the game still going after that point? And then of course security issues as well if you have the simulation actually running on a client. So that's about other than what you sort of stated, that's about the newest paradigm. And the only reason I suggest taking a look at that, because it's very similar in concept to authoritative, and so like you can sort of piggyback off of the lectures you have on authoritative to build into that. But it seems like it's the model a lot of things are going with. That's what Photon's doing, that's what Unet's doing. So that's about the only other thing, other than maybe if you want to like have a game that is just database driven, where you're just sort of like looking into the tables in the database to see, updates. It's completely asynchronous that way.
And Photon does have a lot of SDKs for different client platforms. One of the things I noticed, because I work for a casino company, I'm dealing with people's money. I can't have things being hosted on other servers. I need to basically be in control of the code. And all the examples of Photon, every single example you download talks through the cloud. I was like, that's the one thing I can't do, is I can't have my authoritative server out in the middle of nowhere. I need to have it locked down, because people get upset when we start billing people's credit cards and taking all their money. We got to know why. So there's something called an on-premise server where you can actually have the source code for their server, and you can have all the relaying to yourself if you really want to do that. But as I mentioned, the documentation is absolutely horrible because that's not what they want to push. They want to push these relay stations all over the I guess planet, to make the games wherever you ping from in. We're going to connect to this relay, to this is for matchmaking too. So I would definitely say yes. It's definitely the relaying is the new frontier that people are going to. Does that sound right? You're good with it?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
I like him. He's so cool. Okay.
Anyway, I just super quick. Yeah, you're good. You're totally good. If I think of the three models, yes. So I don't know of any shooter that's doing something better than being authoritative with client-side prediction, and just how much they sort of look back into the past and let the client be okay with how the client was wrong by just making sure they weren't cheating. With fighting game we're using a modified version of. So having said that, we discovered we couldn't do that for the fighting game, and so, but it's not because the model you're describing is out of date or anything like that. That's what everybody's doing. So we're using a modified version of the GGPO algorithm, which is basically a sort of a rollback algorithm where you're telling the server what you're doing. We have a little bit of input delay so that we can. We have a little bit of input delay. We're telling the server what we're doing. The server's checking the timestamp on everything, and if you, because of your lag, get behind, we actually roll the game back on your machine.
Wow.
And and so we actually do a sort of the system where if your lag is bad, you're very frequently doing micro rollbacks, and.
But when you roll everybody's copy back, like an RTS?
No, we're only rolling yours back, based on, and yeah, I'd be happy to tell about our architecture, but basically it's GGPO, except we're server based. But anyway,
So you basically.
I don't think there's any magic that I can think of.
Yeah, you basically tell people what your intentions are going to be before you actually do them. By taking your input, it's like, I'm going to move forwards, but yeah, you haven't moved your player forwards yet.
Yeah, well, it is. Yes, we do have a little bit of input delay before
Okay.
it actually happens.
I think an important thing that gets glossed over is just the asynchronous gameplay, or unless you're doing real-time gameplay, if you're doing anything turn-based, if you're needing a server for a single-player experience, a lot of times all these server solutions are just way overkill. You don't need to be persistently connecting to a live server that's processing things all the time. You can get away with a good backend that has a good data model and database, and tries to optimize those short-lived connections. So if you're not doing anything that's really real time, and it's not as sexy to talk about those things, necessarily. That's not what everyone thinks about. So that's kind of why it gets glossed over, and that's fine, to cover it for a shorter amount of time, but it's still a critical piece.
I'd be curious to pick your brains on what you would do with a video game networking course.
No, I completely agree. Explaining that stuff is murder.
No working.
I can't, like right now in my head, I can't remember how it all works. We have to sit and talk through it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, the client is going to do it.
Other
I'm
questions?
just curious, to your point, for asynchronous play, does Google Relay help at all with that? Not Google, Unity Relay service, does it help at all with asynchronous, just real time?
All the Unity solution is really focused on that real-time gameplay stuff. What we use in Unity, we use Unity as our front end, and I've built several different things that connect, because they've got the www class that basically just makes a web request, and it's horrible. So we use best HTTP.
Yeah, I was gonna say just best.
Yeah, that's I love that, and even better than that, that builds on top of it is something called Web API Kit, and we build all of our APIs on top of that. We're actually working on extending that and making another layer on top of that, because if you've done any sort of web development, you've probably come across Backbone or Angular, and there really is no equivalent of basically saying on the front end, here's your data model, and here's where it corresponds to the data models on the server, and just work for me. Like just have an entity and say save, and then it just connects. There's no solution, so we're kind of had to roll our own, but we build it on top of best HTTP and WAC.
You. Yes.
from a development standpoint, with a lot of these games, like Brawlhalla, you can get a lot of gameplay down before you have any network. Because it's on one person's computer, you can plug through controllers, and you can play and test.
That's right.
How important is it to have that backend ready for the multiplayer portion? Can you just build the game and then work out how the backend multiplayer works, or like does it really need to start from the beginning?
I know, it's horrible. I have horrible news for you. Well, the good news is that if you are making a game and you're working on the short answer is you don't necessarily know where you're going to have your database, and you don't necessarily have to know all of that stuff. You do need to know what model your game is using for running its simulation and how that's going to network, or you will be in what we call the TIE Fighter situation, where that was a classic game, TIE Fighter. Did anybody play TIE Fighter back in the day? Okay, yeah, there we go. And they're like, we got a great idea, TIE Fighter online, it's going to be great. And they were like, we can't do it. We literally can't do it. We can't make this game be networked. It's surprisingly easy to write yourself into a corner with design decisions that get you stuck, or architecture decisions that get you stuck networking wise. With an attack, we have a little bit more, like
Wind
this,
up,
and you
yeah.
kind of understand that it's going to take a minute to swing your fist around. With the dodge, you just don't have that. And so if you designed your entire game with this notion that you were going to, that core to the architecture, or core to the fun of the game is that you were going to be able to dodge like this, and then you get online and you're like, all of a sudden the game becomes unplayable. So you have to build from the start. Like, how is this dodge going to work? That's going to be, that's a gameplay example, and then of course there's architecture examples. And again, I could keep going, but I feel like I'm rambling.
Well, with UNet and Photon, if you sort of write your stuff using UNet and Photon off the bat, not necessarily even like you're thinking about, you should be thinking about it, but even if you're not, the nice thing is like it doesn't care. Like if it's not networked, you just basically what I'm saying is you write the code once, and it works non-networked and networked. So, but you still need to think about like the logical choices that you're going to make as far as like dodging things of that
Executing
nature.
queues, yeah. Yes, other red shirt.
I'm in I have a hard time figuring which technology I'm going to use, mainly because I think that if the game's going to succeed, then I will need multiple other services. So by default, I would use probably Google or AWS because it's pretty much cheap for the bandwidth and hosting, but then I have no service at all. If I eventually want like a leaderboard, data persistence, and things like that, then I'm thinking about Open and FlipPad. And the thing is, if I think about how much it's going to cost me if the game is successful, it's about like 40% of what I plan to charge on Steam. So is it better to start with Google with like very low level and then have to rewrite everything like in a hurry if suddenly the game is good? I don't know where to start. Or
So
use like multiple different technologies in parallel and then it's going to be a mess.
So you're afraid of success?
I'm
But
afraid of
it's
I'm trying to plan ahead, but
It's-
to choose the technology.
it's very fair. You know this, James, with like
Yeah.
SmartFox Server, where you're like, this is
yeah.
great. This is going to be fantastic. Oh my gosh, SmartFox wants 30% of all my money.
Oh yeah.
Isn't a big deal if you got 3 customers.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if
So-
you're successful, hopefully you can pay for that. That's the end goal.
Well,
But yeah, the 30%, that does suck.
I agree that I can pay. The problem is like if it doesn't work out, I don't want to spend time to like input everything now. So it's kind of a balance that I can hardly find between.
Are you going to release your game all at once, or are you going to release in like segments, like test segments to find out what the return is?
It's an RTS,
So
so
you're going to pull the trigger on it.
I guess yeah.
Okay.
Might be the solution to do it in segments.
Just
I
do microtransactions a bit
Yep.
late. Like just wait until, oh, you like the game? Well, I can't afford the servers, so here's your microtransaction to play online. Do a real jerk move like that.
Or
Yeah. You,
Yeah.
yeah. I think.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about a RTS, so that's going to need that real-time strategy kind of, or that's going to need that real-time engine. So if you're gonna start with AWS or Google Cloud, you're going to use some sort of VM. And if at some point you scale up and you think, first of all, if you're being successful, you're going to be able to pay for those things.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that kind of solution on a VM, then you're going to, if you get to a point where you decide, you know what, I can make my own servers and do it better and cheaper, then you're going to be able to take that VM and basically build out a computer that runs that. I mean, the good thing about doing those hosted solutions is you can scale up to meet your demand as you need it, and
Roll
then
back.
if there's right, and then roll back if you don't. And you can always do a mix and supplement them if you architect it right.
And it's much cheaper than the solution with .NET.
Well, Photon, you just pay for this, the CCU, and I think it's like $2,500, and that's it. It's lifetime, so you don't have to worry about anything more. With SmartFox, I think 30%. I think they changed it, but they want royalties of your, and then same thing with Unity. They haven't got their complete pricing. I don't think they have.
They haven't.
I can't
anything
talk about
official
it.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's going to be similar to Photon in that, because like Photon CCU plus you have a max messages per month or something
Right.
like that,
With-
and so again, this goes back to like, how are you managing your network traffic? And in RTS, I mean, back in the day, they were just peer to peer. So I mean, if you could figure out a way to just do
StarCraft.
matchmaking and then do peer to peer. That you mentioned WebSockets earlier, and I did look at WebSockets as a way of sort of rolling my own networking a while back. And WebSockets might be, or a WebSocket library might be a solution. You can actually make a WebSocket connection in the low-level API. I don't think the high-level API has that yet. But that would get around that punch through, and all you'd have to have is just like a server that would, if you're using Unity, a server that would basically do the initial, connect everybody together. But that's an option to offload, is just to not actually worry about maintaining servers other than just sort of connecting people.
With SmartFox and Photon, can you just buy essentially the source code that you can run on your own servers? Do they
Yes.
still do that?
Yeah, the last time I looked at SmartFox, the answer was yes.
Okay, so I mean that's another option for
Yeah.
for using that on your VM. And I mean, the thing is, if you're scaling up to the point where this is actually an issue, like that's a good problem to have.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I'm saying.
You're going to
You're
be
afraid of
successful.
success.
Yeah, and you gotta when you're architecting out a solution, you gotta look for what is going to solve the biggest problem the best way, and then build the rest of that system around that.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, we'll go with you again.
Oh, I had a question about your opinion versus, because you talked about like fudging versus precision. So like there's two ends to that. You got like Smash Brothers, where like if it starts getting uncertain, it slows everything down to make sure everything's fit for the price. Then you've got Killer Instinct, where just take your buttons and whatever happens, and both player wins. That's cool. And in both situations, people are mad. So like, what's your opinion on that? Like, how important is it to be super precise versus fudging? Where's that good area to be?
I don't know. I in my mind, I think of it as, and I think I kind of intimated it earlier in the question, that there's really three silos. There's sort of the MMO model, the first-person shooter model, and the fighting game model. And they all have, like, you kind of decide which lane you want to run your game down, and then sort of, and maybe you can do hybrids and things, but sort of broadly speaking, are you trying to, if it's an MMO, if it's a World of Warcraft style game, you can basically, all you want to do is make sure the guy's not cheating. That's really all you care about, and you can let those simulations go. Then the shooter model, again, where I can trust what you saw, even though, as long as I can trust that you, like with the MMO model, two players can be experiencing different things, and it's okay. And so there's the model around that. The shooter model, where as long as what you say you saw is what you saw, and it didn't happen too far in the past, we're good. And the fighting game model, where let's live with this and have actual slowdowns. You know, it seems insane that that's their solution, right? But, you know, I have total sympathy for that. You know, it's like, okay, we've just run out of, we don't know what's happening. Let's just stop the game and wait for the packets to show up, you know, kind of model, and then just sort of smoothing that out. But as for which one is best, I think just for myself, I think of it as kind of which kind of experience are you trying to deliver.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue on that. Which, like, we see a lot of new MMOs now that aren't target-based, that are more fighting style, that have
Mhm.
dodge and other things. What kind of zany approaches are they using to give you
Mostly they're
both ends of
using
that spectrum?
Mostly they're using the first-person shooter model. If
Yeah.
you're talking about like Destiny or something like that.
I was thinking Guild Wars 2, but I guess there's
Okay,
other ones coming
yeah,
up.
yeah, that one too. It's like, on one hand, is it MMO? Is it a fighting game? Most of them are using the shooter model.
Okay.
You know, basically exactly what, you know, a lot of that hadn't changed much since Half-Life 2.
And that scales to 100 people in a zone, 500 people in a zone.
Well, you can have LODs in networking, or you could have mixed
Mhm.
models. I mean, you could have, you know,
Right.
the overall world simulation
Mhm.
is different
Different
from the
zones,
localized
yeah.
simulation. So, but that obviously becomes a lot more of a pain in the rear. But you know, that's one way you could probably handle that, is mixing models.
Yeah, definitely. Like on City of Heroes, we would say, okay, how close are you? You know, if you're within 200 feet, we're running one model, and if you're not, if you are outside the farthest range of the farthest attack, we're running a completely different model for you. We're sending just an update every second that kind of says what you probably did. You know, that's, yeah, what you said.
Okay.
But like, where would an RTS sit?
As you may know, RTS is kind of its own model because it's got, you know, it's not as time sensitive, but you want to know where every unit is. So they're all, usually they're all running just exactly the same simulation with inputs, you know, and they're just receiving each other's inputs and
On the client side?
Yeah.
Like synchronized simulation?
yeah,
It's input delay.
Yeah.
Click a button, both people know to take that action.
yeah,
at the same time.
yeah. A lot of times on RTS, you'll click the button, then the message will go to the server will turn around and tell you to click that button, you know, so that you're all running the exact same simulation. And you just don't notice the delay because it's an RTS.
Yes.
I don't know exactly.
I was
yeah.
I mean, the original MOBA ran in Warcraft 3.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was engine, so.
Give it a mobile like Smutty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is
Which
not
is
here.
which I was actually using Unreal's model, and it's using that first person model. Yeah, I don't know. I don't actually know what he's doing.
I bet
What do you
you
guys
could
think?
RTS
Yeah.
When someone drops out, the whole game pauses, right? For everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, they just put bodies in place.
No, they don't even do that. Here at the storm fund,
Okay.
it goes right out, and force recall carries the base.
But, okay, let's say it slows down, one person has a really laggy
This is fun.
computer that say Bob is slowing down the
Yeah.
game and everybody slows down. That's synchronous simulation. If League isn't doing that, then they must be doing something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, with everything, I mean, just fake everything you can. So, I mean, if the player doesn't know and they don't care, then it doesn't matter. I mean, I think that's a mantra in games in general. It's like the player doesn't care if you made the game with chicken wire and duct tape. It's all about their experience. And so if you can find ways to legitimize the experience to sort of hide the fact that you have, you know, some sort of internet connectivity issue of some sort, then do so. You know, that's another. I think that's what it goes back to. You know, planning networking your game early, because you'll need to think about those things and say, okay, well, logically, how are we going to handle this? So, you know, like I was saying, with if I can get this to work, I might be blending the what's rendered on the beast of the machine server and what's rendered locally in order to like make up for when I have drops in connectivity and whatnot. So.
Okay, well, I have 11 o'clock, and we would be happy to talk about this, but we have other things we probably need to be doing. I wanted to thank everyone for coming, and thank our panelists. Say hi, everyone. And everyone have a good siege.